photos of a steel yard over a period of time to see how much steel is going in and out. And it's totally legal. It's done from orbit. That's a kind of information that was not available 25 years ago. So I skipped over technical intelligence. Technical intelligence, or TechInt, is the collection of evidentiary materials in the field. And to give you an example of what that, and these all intersect, by the way. So you might have a case, as we did once, where there was a company that had a very specialized kind of chemical that they made and sold, and it was a good business. And it was not actually a difficult thing to put together. The key was in the amounts of the different ingredients and in the order in which they were put together. And if you knew that, you could actually just stir it up in a bathtub, as long as you did it in the right sequence and the right amount. And what they essentially realized is that several of their employees had quit over a period of time, and the way they had segregated this information was each key employee only knew a certain part of the process. But what they woke up one day, I think, and realized is that these 5 employees all together knew the whole process. So they obviously became very worried and engaged us to figure out what was going on. Well, the employees had left the area where they were, and we had to trace them and found them in another state. And they had indeed set up a business and were indeed offering a similar product. And so we actually set up a fake, this was a clandestine operation. We set up a fake company to go in and do a buy. And that is specifically technical intelligence. In other words, we're going in as a customer, collecting this information, and because there was a likely theft of intellectual property, we actually involved the FBI in that project. And we worked with them. They wanted us to do it. And then we turn the evidence over to them. But that's an example of technical intelligence. Another example would be if you think someone's making something in a factory somewhere. It could be people making bombs. You can walk the street, send somebody to walk down the street outside the factory, never go on the property with specially treated tennis shoes, and the bottoms of those shoes will collect chemical samples that would come out if they're actually doing that sort of thing, and pop them in a plastic bag and send them off to be analyzed. That's technical intelligence, or TechInt. I want to just talk briefly about statistical intelligence, and this is the world of psychographics and cluster patterning. And essentially everybody in the United States and everybody in the world has been divided into sets of people who share attributes. So there are people who are middle income, interested in certain kinds of sports, read certain kinds of magazines, drink certain kinds of beer. There are people who are low income, watch different kinds of sports, listen to different kinds of music and so forth. This has all been charted. And so what this psychographic information tries to do is to match those elements to geographies and to people. And, there's saying birds of a feather flock together. That is essentially what this is that people, not only do people with shared characteristics share attributes, and we all think that, well, I'm the only person in the world who likes this and that. Wrong. There are lots of other people like you and me and everybody else, and we all share these attributes. But they also tend to flock together. They tend to live in similar places. So it's a very interesting discipline that's come up over the last 30 or 40 years. And it's, as I say, based on identifying and understanding patterns of shared attributes or congruencies within a population of people or businesses in a single area. Clients of a company break themselves into this, and so forth. It's amazing, and then this is really a result of the information processing age, that we had the power to process information and see these patterns. So it's, again, a kind of intelligence. So analysis, so you collected all this information. What do you do with it? Well, it's really just raw data until you've analyzed it. And so analysis uses a lot of different tools. You look at patterns, anomalies, as I mentioned, integrated analytics of various kinds, relational analytics of various kinds, both qualitative and quantitative. The intelligence world tends towards the qualitative, but not exclusively. Meta-analysis is a very interesting field where you analyze multiple studies to produce information. And what is it you're analyzing? Well, it can be surveys of people, it can be all kinds of information, and you can then pattern it in different ways. And so that essentially is the intelligence cycle. And the magic of it is that it's iterative. It goes around multiple times within any given project. And it really is the best tool we have to drill down into a subject. And that basically describes the overall approach of intelligence. Now, in the real world, and this is a business-oriented diagram. You could make it for other things. So, you have a company. It has products or services. It has customers. It has competitors. It has all these variables, internal and external, and it has shareholders or stakeholders. So, what the intelligence world tries to do is break this into many component parts and then use these techniques that I've been describing, open source, technical intelligence, statistical intelligence, human intelligence, imagery intelligence, to essentially be able to peel the onion. That's the term we use in the intelligence world, and give you insight into these specific things. Now, you're not going to get insight into all these things, but let's say that there's a certain element that's bothering you, regulatory issues. X factors was the term. I still like it. It's been ruined by that TV show, but it means things you don't know, the unknown unknowns, to quote Donald Rumsfeld. It's sometimes called black swans today. There's a famous book with that name. So, that gives you a feeling for the kind of approaches. Now, I'll talk briefly about some of the things that we've done, and one of the areas that we work in and do a great deal of work in is backgrounding individuals and entities. And most of this is for investors who are looking at investing in a company or a new venture or a fund that's managing money. And these investors can be individuals, they can be groups of individuals, they can be professional investors like funds themselves, private equity, venture capital funds, hedge funds, or they can be very large investors, what are called institutional investors, like pension plans and so forth. So probably many people in this room, if not everyone, has money in one of those sorts of things. Anyone who's a pensioner is involved in an organization that is to attempt to achieve higher returns and pay more money to the pensioners, is investing in a whole range of types of investments. It's worth it to actually know about this, and they do publish information, and I encourage everybody to look at that, so you know what's going on with your money. But in any event, so there's a lot of work that needs to be done to background people. So in terms of the subjects, you're looking at key individuals. You're looking at their histories, their activities, their contacts. Who are they? How do they behave? How have they behaved in the past? The tiger doesn't usually change its stripes. What can that tell you about this individual or set of individuals to whom you're thinking of giving money? Where is your money coming from? This is a big issue for some kinds of investors who are bringing money in from sources that might have some, what we call funny money, money laundered money and that sort of thing. So that's another area that you can look at. In whom are you investing? What's their pattern of behavior? Very specifically, how have they dealt with things in the past that might arise again? Who are you hiring? Pre-employment intelligence. Where is the intellectual property in a situation? There have been cases where it's not what you think it is in a company. What vulnerabilities, activities, links, and associations does a company or an individual have that you should know about? Are there shell companies? Are there assets being hidden? This is very important litigation intelligence. Is a partner conducting side transactions without authority to do so, or without knowledge of the other partners? So I'll just give you a few examples. We had a case where there was a company that was essentially making a very elaborate set of activities, and they were designed to create a almost too dense to penetrate web that could be used for insurance fraud. I can't go into the details of a lot of these cases. Some I can. I can never tell the names, obviously, of clients or of any of the cases. And what it involved was this shell company structure, where there were multiple companies that were held under other companies, and it was very difficult, although not impossible, to penetrate who owned what. And that is a common element, and it relates to this next one I can tell you a little bit more detail about. Sometimes I call this case finding the Maseratis. So we had a company, the client was a venture capital group out of New York. They were investing in a very well-run medical supply chain company in the Midwest, in the U.S. And that company had expanded into a number of states in the Midwest. All their business was there. They wanted to expand some more, and this investor was giving them money to do that, or was looking at giving them money to do that. So they said, check out the top 7 or 8 people in the entity and so forth. It all checked out fine, except for one person who had an anomaly. In other words, a violation of a pattern. And that one person was the CEO and founder. And the anomaly was that we found 3 Maseratis registered to his name in South Beach, Miami, Florida. There was no other business of any kind that related to Florida that this individual had to do with. And so, you know, a lot of people would say that's just a data array problem. And the data array is incredibly polluted, and there are lots of problems. There are lots of false positives and false negatives. And so easy to say, that's just an anomaly. It just doesn't mean anything. That's not good intelligence. We always take those things as a signal. And so we began to look at the address at which these Maseratis were registered. It was a $2 million condo in South Beach, and it was owned by a company. Well, those things happen, so we looked at who owns that company. Well, another company owned that company, and then another company owned that company. So here you have 3 layers now being owned by companies, and sure enough, that final one was owned by this individual who was the CEO and founder of the company that the investor was thinking. So to make a long story short, nobody knew that he had the condo. Nobody knew that he had the Maseratis. He would take business trips, and he would do whatever he did on business for 2 or 3 days, and then he'd go down to Miami for 2 or 3 days and do whatever he did with whomever he did it with the 3 Maseratis and the $2 million condo. The problem with that is that nobody knew about it. So if he's lying about that, what else is he lying about? And where did the money come from, and so forth. So that's the kind of thing that a good investigative approach can uncover, if it's there to be uncovered. There are often these hidden relationships, hidden entities, things that people don't want you to know about, but that you can detect that kind of anomaly that will tell you that there's something that's going on. There was another case where, again, an American case where there was a company that was in the furniture delivery business, and they were, again, getting a pretty good-sized investment from a private equity firm. The private equity firm had not asked the right questions, and it turned out that there was literally a stack of paper that high with small print of lawsuits that this company had been part of because the delivery function was very poorly managed, and it was outsourced to a family member, a company owned by a family member, and pieces of furniture got dropped. In one case, somebody got killed. And so, you know, it was not that you couldn't do the deal, but it was that, okay, a condition of it is we're changing the way we do that. So that's another example of the kind of thing that... Questionable past and side activities is something that comes up occasionally. And we were asked to look at a company in France that was owned by a Frenchman and an American, a very interesting technology company. The American had a background doing a number of things, including working with some of the U.S. intelligence agencies. But he also had a very unfortunate background in doing what seemed to be, and we were actually able to corroborate this, it's selling sexual slaves out of the Middle East, out of Eastern Europe into the Middle East. And so, you know, the minute that we were able to to show that that was going on. Obviously, the investor backed away completely. And so that's a more extreme example, but it did happen. And then unfortunately, it was the American, not the Frenchman, who was doing it. Does someone have a litigious history? Do they sue everybody they come in contact with? It's a very simple question, but you'd be surprised how many people are essentially in business to sue other people. And they can be very successful at it, but you don't want to be involved with them. This was an interesting case, and it's what I call pulling the curtain. We had a case where an individual had a good career. He was being looked at as CEO of a newly acquired company by a private equity firm. And he had submitted a resume, and essentially he had said that he left one job later than he did and said that he started another job earlier than he did. And we were able to, by verifying the dates, we were able to discover that, let's say he actually left a job in October of 2003, and he said he left it in February of 2004, and he started the next job in September of 2004, but he said he started it in March of 2004. So you really had this interregnum, this period where he wasn't doing those two things, and he pulled the edges of them closer. And so what the question, whenever you see somebody pull a curtain, what is it they're trying to hide? So we pulled the curtain back, and we found that he had had a third job that had been a total disaster. He had, it was a mismatch. He was not the right person for the job. But the key thing was that he had had a golden parachute provision, which means that if for any reason the job didn't work out, he got a large sum of money, well into 7 figures. And despite the fact that within a few weeks he left this job, he insisted on taking that golden parachute. It was, and the company paid him off. But you want to know that that's the character of someone you're dealing with, that they will not only, tighten the thing to the point that, they're going to take every legal advantage, fine, people do that, but then they're going to lie about it by trying to hide it and pretend it never happened. So that's often what we're looking for, is that kind of thing. There are lots of other cases of associations with questionable entities or individuals. And I'm happy to now, I think I've talked long enough. I would love to open it up to questions about anything and everything. So I'll try to avoid answering all of them.